I think that this is a great opportunity for us to communicate on our common interest, which is in part at least honest judiciaries.
Yes.
When Mr. Weber invited me to address you, we agreed that I would not address the issue of jurisdiction, because if I did, we would get enmeshed in a discussion that would not lead to any positive result. And so I intend to keep my word. What I would like to do this afternoon, is to present the strategy that I have put together to expose institutionalized wrongdoing in the federal judiciary. So my purpose is not to prove or disprove anything concerning your program, but rather to expose this strategy that can be applied now, that can have results within the next 2 years, particularly here in the United States, because we are now entering into the primaries and the presidential campaign. And I have taken that into account in order to make the strategy more current and also applicable. In addition, there is a precedent, as I would mention, in pertinent part for this strategy, and therefore it is very realistic. What we can do today is that I will go through the material. I understand that you have received the paper that I made available to all of you, the paper for this seminar. I hope that you were able to read it, at least that you are familiar with the structure as set forth in the table of contents. And I have also prepared some slides. I sent Mr. Weber this morning an email to see whether it would be possible to show each slide at a time as if it were another participant. I do not know what will happen with this, whether it is possible.
Yes, well, what we said is that each person will just be watching the slides on their own.
Okay, so they have the slides.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, we have your materials. I was not able to download, and so some of us, I have the paper, the PDF, but I wasn't able to download the slides. But everybody does have access to it all. Yes.
Okay, is it the big file that you have? How many pages does the file have? If it is the bigger file, you can go to page 400, around 56 of the big file, and there you will find OL 202, and that is the first slide.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, so I will start stating that this strategy for exposing institutionalized wrongdoing in the United States is based on my study of the Federal Judiciary and its judges. And it is precisely the file that you have that contains the hundreds of pages of research that I have done to provide the facts for this assertion that there is wrongdoing in the federal judiciary, and that it is so pervasive that it is in fact part of the modus operandi of the federal judiciary. So the whole title of the file and the study contained therein is exposing judges on accountability and consequent riskless wrongdoing. And that encapsulates the basis for the claim: unaccountability, risklessness, and then wrongdoing. And then the subtitle is Pioneering the News and Publishing Field of Judicial Unaccountability Reporting. And this new field, judicial unaccountability reporting, is a part of the problem that we encounter today of unaccountability by judges, because there is no reporting on judges' wrongdoing. It is fine for journalists to report on the wrongdoing of a president who is going to be in office only 4 years, let alone a representative of the House in Congress that is going to be there for 2 years, or even a senator that is going to be for 6 years in office. But it is something very different when you deal with federal judges that have a life appointment. They can become your enemies forever. So that is a problem that we have to overcome, because we do need journalists. Without journalists, we cannot implement the strategy. And the fact that this is a new news and publishing field provides an element of the strategy, which is that it can be the basis for a profit-making enterprise. And we need money. Without money, there is no way we can get in touch with the public, we can travel, we can communicate with each other. So this is taking, as I said before, the facts into account, the reality, putting that into the strategy so that we can put forth a realistic strategy. Now, I would like to mention now some of the key official statistics. They are official because my research is based on the official statistics of the United States courts. Each court prepares the statistics of its cases, the different elements of the cases, and then all of them are sent to the administrative office of the U.S. courts. And this is an office that, as its title indicates, only takes care of administrative matters. But it is presided by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. That means it is part of the Federal Judiciary. And it is the Chief Justice who appoints the director of the office and the assistant, the deputy director. So it is a very powerful body within the Federal Judiciary, because it is the body that coordinates the policy making of the Federal Judiciary. And all its different committees are staffed by judges appointed by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. So these statistics are reliable. In addition, they are sent to Congress every year. So the statistics that I have here, even though they will be shocking to you, have been known to Congress for scores of years, because they have been receiving the annual report of the director of the administrative office of the U.S. courts. And you can see that report. And the next one is coming out in March in the website of the administrative office. You just tap administrative office of the U.S. courts and do a Google search, or otherwise rely on the links that I have provided to everything that I will mention to you today. So the first statistic that is very revealing is the fact that in the last 226 years, since the creation of the Federal Judiciary in 1789, the number of federal judges that have been impeached and removed is eight judges. To be able to compare that to something else, on September the 30th, 2013, there were on the federal bench 2,217 judges, justices, and magistrates. That gives you an idea of the fact that once a person is nominated by the president and becomes confirmed by the Senate of the United States to a justiceship or a judgeship, that person can be sure of remaining in office regardless of what he or she does. So that is an incentive to do whatever they want. And given the fact that judges decide over people's property and their liberty and all their rights and duties, they have an enormous amount of power, particularly since their decisions are applied nationwide and they take a precedence over the decisions of the states. So that gives you an idea of the magnitude of power that they have, and with power comes corruption. You may have already heard that axiom that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, and that is the case here. In addition, the judges also apply self-exemption from discipline, because under federal law, any person that has a complaint has to file the complaint with the chief judge of the respective circuit. And 99.82% of all complaints filed against the judges are dismissed without any investigation whatsoever. And up to 100% of appeals from those dismissals are also denied. So that means that it is useless to complain against a federal judge, because the peers of the complaint about a judge are going to protect him no matter what. The other very telling statistic is that 75% of all appeals to the Court of Appeals are disposed of by summary order. A summary order is simply a piece of paper whose only operative word is affirm. What they affirm is the decision of the district court below. So you spend thousands of dollars, perhaps even tens of thousands of dollars, appealing to the circuit court, and in 75% of the cases, you only get that summary order, one word, and nothing else, no explanation. Reasonless fiat of raw judicial power. In addition, you have another 11% of appeals to the circuit courts that are disposed of by decisions that are so perfunctory that the judges themselves who wrote them mark them as not precedential and not for publication. That only means that those decisions can be completely arbitrary and capricious, and by their own definition, they establish no precedent. Now, how can you fit that with the fact that in our legal system, precedent is the basis for the law? Initially, the law was established because judges made the decisions and other judges relied on them in order to establish continuity of expectations, so that people would know what to expect if they engage in one or the other kind of behavior. how is it possible that the circuit courts write decisions that are not presidential? What is their value? None. They cannot be found on the internet. They have to be looked up because they are not published, looked up in the circuit courts for no purpose at all because they are not presidential. So this is a way of judges simply to engage in completely arbitrary, capricious conduct. That is part of the wrongdoing, part of deciding your rights and your duties, the fate of your property and your liberty without giving you any reason whatsoever. And that allows the judges to engage in wrongdoing by using the decision to favor themselves or their peers or the people that are close to the judges. Another important statistic is that in the circuit courts, more than 51% of all litigants are pro se. They have no clue what they are doing. They didn't have any clue, most likely, when they also went to district court pro se, because the law is very difficult. But once they appeal to the circuit courts, they are completely out of their depth, because in the circuit courts, you do not argue the facts. What you argue is the law. And what you argue specifically is a reversible error. Now, if you do not understand what the error is, you cannot properly argue your case. So the process also provides a fertile ground for judges to engage in wrongdoing. So this means that we have identified the enabling circumstances of wrongdoing in the federal judiciary. The first one is unaccountability. And the historical record, as I mentioned before, shows that judges are unaccountable. When you can do whatever you want without fearing losing your job, let alone being indicted, convicted, and sent to prison, then you can engage in wrongdoing. You have an incentive in getting the most you can by misusing your power. That tells you the fact that judges are unaccountable, that their wrongdoing is riskless. That removes another inhibition to doing wrong, because they have no adverse consequence to fear. Then, as can be gathered from the statistics that I mentioned before, if judges do not have to give any reasoning for their decisions are in effect secret. Nobody understands, because nobody knows what elements they use to arrive at their decisions. But their secrecy is not only manifest in their decisions, it is also in the way they conduct their business of running the federal judiciary and all the other aspects of judges' performance, because all their meetings, whether they are adjudicative, administrative, policy making, or disciplinary, are held behind closed doors. So this is secrecy that provides an incentive to do wrong, because nobody will know about it. And that allows for judges to coordinate their wrongdoing. In secrecy, people can coordinate what they are going to do because nobody else is going to know, and because the people with whom they coordinate their wrongdoing are also engaged up in it. They have no incentive whatsoever in telling the authorities about a proposal to engage in wrongdoing, because the person who is proposing that could tell on them. So secrecy provides the means for people to engage in wrongdoing. So now Let's uh, focus on what to do about this. We have already seen that filing complaints in court against the judges gets the complainant nowhere. Whether it is suing judges in court, the judges that are presiding over the case are going to hold the complaint about judge harmless, and the case will be dismissed, or the case will be steered toward a finding of either not guilty or not liable in a civil case. So the strategy, if we're going to expose wrongdoing in the federal judiciary, has to be an out-of-court strategy. And it cannot be to try to point out one rogue judge, because as I mentioned before, there are 2,217, at least a year and a half ago. The statistics for last year will not come out until March, until they are published in the annual report of the director. So what good would it do to invest an enormous amount of time and effort trying to prove that one judge made a decision that could somehow was wrong, and nevertheless get him out? And who would be the replacement? Another person appointed by the same people that appointed the wrongdoing judge. And those persons are politicians. And this is also an element that must be taken into account in the strategy. Politicians are the ones who recommend, endorse, nominate, and confirm their judges. Therefore, they're not going to turn against their own appointees. If we recognize the fact that in order to expose wrongdoing and lead to reform, we need the laws to be adopted and enforced, then we need to take into account of politicians. But as we know, that is self-contradictory. Judges are not going to be exposed by the people that put them on the bench. So it has to be another external force that prevails upon the self-interest of politicians that forces them to expose judicial wrongdoing and undertake reform. Moreover, if that force is going to know about this wrongdoing, then they have to be informed. And the only institution that can do that is journalists and the media outlets. The media needs to do that, but it cannot do it just because we ask them to do the right thing, because they have to take into consideration, like anybody else, the commercial repercussions of going against judges. And we have already stated that they are life appointed. So the media have to take into account the fact that if they expose judges, they're going to have enemies on the federal bench for life. We have to find a way of giving them an incentive to do that. And the incentive, as we mentioned at the beginning, is a new kind of reporting. The reporting that attracts the attention of the public, because the public is finally the one who determines whether media entities make money or don't make money. If they don't watch their programs, so don't buy their publications, then there is no advertisement and there is no media. How are we going to cause the public to demand that wrongdoing judges be exposed? Well, we need to outrage them. We needed to inform them that wrongdoing is so intrinsic to the federal judiciary that there is actually no justice, no system of justice, that the justice that the immense majority of people, as we mentioned before, 75% get appeals disposed of by summary orders, another 11% by non-publishable and non-presidential decisions. There is no justice based on the rule of law, and that can outrage the public that is so conscious of their rights. In America, it is very important to uphold the rule of law. That is a part of the psyche of Americans. So if we manage to convince journalists that it is in their own interest to expose on federal judges because they are going to cause a scandal, and as every scandal does, attract the attention of the public becomes outraged, and then it creates its own incentive for the media to keep publishing about judges, their own accountability, their risklessness, their secrecy, and their coordinated wrongdoing. That is the way, the basic principles of the strategy. We need to inform and outrage the public through journalists. How do we get a journalist to do that? Well, we cannot just say, okay, we say, and we can even show you the statistics of how much wrongdoing there is in the federal judiciary. Now go out and expose that to the public. That is not the way journalists work. And then the task would be formless. It would be unfocused. It would be too demanding on journalists. Most of them have no legal training. So that cannot be a way of doing that. That is why I have identified two stories that go all the way to the top of the federal judiciary, involve politicians, and those two stories have the potential to focus the attention of the investigation of journalists and induce them to investigate further. And those stories, because they concern people at the top of government, have the potential to outrage the public, particularly since we are now moving into the primaries and the presidential campaign. And that is the reason why it is so important to be connected to the facts and current facts and reality. We can engage in wishful thinking about exposing judges, but if we do not have a realistic strategy that can be applied given the interest of other people, then we will not be able to implement our strategy. So these are two stories. They are the President Obama and Justice Sotomayor story. And they follow the money investigation. President Obama nominated then Judge Sotomayor. She is a woman, Hispanic, and many people, many groups that were asking for a justice who was retiring at the time to be replaced by a woman and a Hispanic, the first Hispanic to go to the Supreme Court, were asking for Judge Sotomayor to be nominated. So President Obama nominated her, because he had an interest in doing so, to garner the favor of those people that were asking for him to nominate a Judge Sotomayor, so that in turn they would support the passage of Obamacare in Congress. And as you may well know, Obamacare is the signature legislation of the president. That means the key piece of legislation that is supposed to take his name into the history books. Because for more than 30 years, there have been efforts here in the US to provide medical care for the general public, and everybody failed. He has been the first president to have a chance to pass a law that would provide for such medical care. So it was very important for him to do so. And in order to have Judge Sotomayor confirmed, what he did was he lied to the American public about the honesty of Judge Sotomayor. That honesty had been put in doubt by none other than the Washington Post, the New York Times, and Politico in articles where they suspected her of having concealed assets. That obviously is done in order to evade taxes and in order not to declare sources of money that are illegal. That would have derailed the nomination of Judge Sotomayor to the Supreme Court, because she would not have been confirmed by the Senate. That actually would have dealt to her resignation and perhaps to her indictment for evasion of taxes. So that would have been a disaster. But it was more important for him to get her confirmed than to tell the public the truth, or simply to refer her for investigation by the FBI. But instead what he did was to take the FBI vetting report that, with the use of subpoena power, must have found even much more evidence of concealment of assets, and keep it secret. So you can imagine how much the democratic brand would be tarnished if it were revealed by journalists that the president lied to the American public about the honesty of a judge with whom he has saddled the American public and the judiciary for the next 20 or 30 years, during which she can be saying the law of the land in the Supreme Court. It would be a scandal from which the Republicans obviously would profit the most, not because they are interested in honest judiciaries any more than the Democrats are. They have also appointed and confirmed their own judges. They are their judges on the bench, but simply because it would suit them to win over more votes in the primaries and the presidential election if they could entangle the Democratic Party in such a scandal at the very top. So the investigation there that is proposed of is a follow the money investigation, with the powers of the of journalists today, the use of the internet, the use of other social media. It would be much easier to follow the money now than it was when that phrase came into use, and that was during Watergate. In Watergate, the journalists of the Washington Post, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, followed the money and that had been used to defend the people that had been apprehended in the Democratic National Headquarters in the building complex of Watergate in Washington, D.C. And they said, how is it possible that if these people were simply burglars, they are being defended by top lawyers of Washington, D.C.? And then they said, follow the money. And the money trail led first to a bank in Florida, and from there to the Republican National Committee for the Re-election of President Nixon. That's how they realized that it was a slush fund held there that had been used to pay these 5 people that ultimately were found to have engaged in political espionage concocted in the White House. So all the White House aides of President Nixon, all of them ended in prison. And as you know, the president on August the 8th, 1974, resigned the presidency. So today, when there is the internet and social media, which at that time were not even known by name in 1972 through 1974, today it would be easier for journalists to dig up more information concerning this story. The other story is the Federal Judiciary and NSA story. And as you know, the NSA is the agency of the federal government that has been revealed to have engaged in dragnet collection of communication metadata. And what that means is they collected information of scores of millions of Americans when they made a telephone call, or they used the internet, or sent a fax or an email. It is said that they did not listen to the conversations, that they only got the metadata, that is when it happened, what numbers were dialed, and all the information that puts in place and in time a communication, but they were not authorized to do that. And the president, in his report on the NSA, stated that not everything that we can do technically should be done if it contradicts our values. So there is no controversy that the NSA violated the law in order to gather information. But at that time, they could claim that it was in the national interest. What this story does is to find a link between the Federal Judiciary and the NSA concerning judges' wrongdoing. That means the NSA has to submit its secret requests for secret orders of surveillance to the secret court established under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. Everything there happens in secret. The NSA obtains up to 100% of those requests confirmed. So that means that the secret court established by the FISA court, that is how it is, FISA Act, that is how it is called, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, rubber stamps its requests. Now, what we are claiming on the basis of the facts is that there is a link between the federal judiciary and all the interference with the communications of people that try to expose their wrongdoing. And we want to find out to what extent the federal judiciary has used its vast communication network, which handles hundreds of millions of briefs and entries into dockets and retrieval of files. So it is very vast. How it has been misused to interfere with the communications of people that criticize their wrongdoing. And perhaps Mr. Weber can tell the other participants what he has experienced in the way of interference with his email. I can tell you that my email at Dropbox, Gmail, and Hotmail, which is Microsoft, have been disabled all of a sudden in the past month. And now I cannot send emails from Verizon because I get a message that it is spam. That's why this morning I sent an email to Mr. Weber, and I couldn't from Verizon. I had to go to my account in England, in Cambridge. So in addition to that, I have made a statistical study of the probabilities of the massive effort to get in touch with other people, to assemble them, to petition for a redress of grievances against judges being negative. It is statistically impossible that people that presumably have an interest in exposing that wrongdoing would not communicate back. So the assumption is that there has been interference. And you can imagine that if the journalist could expose such a connivance between the federal judiciary and the NSA in a quid pro quo, that means the federal judiciary rubber stamps the requests of the NSA for secret orders of surveillance, and the NSA helps the federal judiciary and its judges to do two things. The first is to interfere with the communications of critics of judges, of federal judges. And the other one is, obviously, to transfer money, conceal assets through the network used by the two entities. The largest in the world by the NSA, run by the NSA, and that very vast that has a national scope run by the federal judiciary. That scandal would be much intense and outraging than the one that was set off by the revelations of Edward Snowden. And the reason is, as I mentioned before, that the revelations of NASA illegal activity, NSA illegal activity, could be excused as performed in the interest of national security. But what the federal judiciary is doing cannot possibly have any explanation, any excuse to engage in the violation of the right of speech, freedom of the press, and the right to assemble peacefully, to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Three elements of the First Amendment to the US Constitution. That would be the scandal that would outrage the people the most, and so much more than the original NSA scandal. So that gives you an idea that these two stories have a reasonable, realistic chance of attracting the interest of both journalists to investigate them and uh, to outrage the general public, and the general public to demand from politicians to investigate further and to reform the judiciary to prevent such violations of the Constitution and also of the law. The federal judiciary has in place several means of preventing this investigation. Obviously, as we mentioned before, they can dismiss complaints, they can try to interfere with the communications of people. They can also retaliate against journalists. But if there are so many of them exposing that wrongdoing, there is no way judges can take on the whole media. And that is the reason why it is so important to talk not just to one single journalist, but to many of them, because if many of them start investigating the federal judiciary simultaneously through these pinpointed and focused stories, then judges will not be able to retaliate against all of them. And that is why it is important to implement the strategy using the following principles. The first one is to make presentations to journalists, either at the press conference or at their quarters, so as to set forth before them the interest that they have, the commercial interest, the interest in getting a scoop that can make a national name for them in investigating these two stories. Another venue that is very important for these presentations is schools of journalism, of law, of business, and of information technology. And the reason is because the students there could be recruited not to help us, to help themselves by participating in either courses that apply their particular learning to this investigation, or to a practicum. That means that they would be working under the supervision of people that can attest to their academic performance during the investigation. And that is why I have set forth a list of academic activities that these students could engage in if they were to participate in this investigation for credit. That means for academic credit. It is important to make these presentations because students, particularly graduate students, are incredibly hardworking. They want to prove themselves. They want, in addition, to impress their professors for obvious reasons, that they need good grades and also recommendation if they want to obtain a good job or go on to a PhD studies and to a degree. And also because they want to impress recruiters. When recruiters see in a resume that this student has participated as a team member in exposing wrongdoing in the federal judiciary, that has set off a scandal greater than the ones that we have known in the past, that would impress them, because that means that he can do the same, or she can do the same here as an employee in our company. So what we are trying to do is to appeal to the self-interest of students in joining this type of investigation for academic credit. In addition, obviously, if we make presentations at schools, we can also bring on board professors that would also have a self-interest in joining the investigation. The more scandalous this investigation becomes, the more outrage it provokes in the general public. What will happen is ever more journalists will join it. And then we will have what we already have during Watergate, a generalized media investigation of the scandal. And the more journalists investigate the two stories and bring out revelations of wrongdoing at the top of government, not only in the Federal Judiciary, but also among those very politicians that appointed those judges, the more outrageous the news will be, the more people will be attracted to it because they have something in their own interest there. And that is to make a decision for whom they are going to vote in the primaries and in the presidential election. So this principle of self-interest runs through the whole strategy. We have to take into account of why people are going to do what we wanted them to do. They're going to do it in their own interest, not because we ask them to risk retaliation from federal judges. There must be something in it for them that is so attractive that they are willing to risk an ever lesser amount of retaliation from judges, because once they are on the defensive, because there are so many exposing news coming out, then they will be less effective in retaliating. And what will happen is that during the primaries and the presidential election, there will be so much outrage in the public that the public will force politicians to take a stand on the investigation that happened during Watergate, and that happened most recently, only last year, in a spectacular case. And that was the case of the Virginia primaries for the House of Representatives in Congress, a federal, one of the two federal chambers of Congress. The Republican leader of the House ran in that primary, and he was defeated by a no-name candidate. Why? Because he had defended an idea that was anathema to many of his voters. And they removed him, even though he was the top figure for the Republican Party in the House of Representatives. So it is precedented, and very recently, that the public has the power, if they are outraged at an idea or an act of politicians, to withhold donations, to withhold volunteered work, to withhold word of mouth endorsement of candidates, to withhold good comments when they are polled by pollsters about those politicians, and obviously to vote against them. So if the politicians feel the pressure of an outraged public concerning judicial wrongdoing, they are more likely to, at the very least, call for investigation from Congress and if they are in office and also running for re-election, to open investigations of those judges and of the two stories. And that would allow then either both the Congress and the FBI to use their more intrusive investigative powers. Here we are talking about powers that journalists obviously do not have. That is subpoena power, search and seizure, power of contempt, and the power to bring criminal charges against the judges and the politicians. So what we expect is that once this investigation by the authorities is in full swing, that there will be ever more pressure to get politicians to commit to judicial reform. And what judicial reform entails is in particular the establishment of citizen boards of accountability, judicial accountability, and discipline. And that would be a manifestation of the principles that should lead the way of judicial reform, and that is transparency, because the boards would have the power to get documents from judges and from the judiciary. Also, transparency means that all the meetings of judges would have to be held open, just the way Congress is open to the public. You see on TV so many meetings of the cabinet of the president that are televised in part or in whole. So that transparency is a key element of judicial reform. Another element is obviously accountability. The citizen boards would be able to receive publicly filed complaints against the judges. That means that today, if you complain against a judge, the complaint is secret. Nobody knows about that. And the problem with that is that a complaint that is a secret does not allow you to establish trends, to discover patterns of wrongdoing, to discover connections between people that are engaged in wrongdoing. Complaints against the judges filed in secret only protect the judges. When have you ever seen that there has been a law that says if you complain against Sears or Exxon or Apple or Microsoft or any other big company, you have to do that in a sealed complaint? Because otherwise other people would get information from your complaint and then they will simply copy it and file more complaints. That argument is not applicable. That has never been the case. So why should it be the case that judges get the benefit of complaints against them filed secretly? That has to be eliminated, and that is a top element of judicial reform. In addition, the citizen boards of accountability and discipline would also have powers of subpoena and search and seizure and contempt. And it would hold public hearings on complaints against the judges precisely for the purpose that public hearings are held in Congress in order to find what the people have to say about the issue, in order to be the representatives of the people, not just those who have been entrusted with power and have embezzled it for their own benefit. So public hearings is a crucial element of judicial reform. Another is discipline, so that the board would have the power to discipline judges by either transferring them to another court or to a lower court, or recommend that they be impeached and removed. And they would have also the power to impose liability. That means that judges and the judiciary would be liable to compensate victims, and they would have to do so out of their own pocket. So it would not be the taxpayer that would pay for the wrongdoing, it would be they who would pay for their own wrongdoing to the victims of their wrongdoing. So now what we can do is try to form a team that works on the presentations of these two unique national stories of President Obama, Justice Sotomayor, on concealment of assets and other wrongdoing, and of the Federal Judiciary and the NSA. We have to, those are concrete projects, not a pie in the sky, not something diffused and intangible. This is very concrete, something on which we can say, okay, we can do it this way or that way, but we know exactly how to focus our attention. Then that calls on for a division of labor. So some people can do something and other people can do something else, depending on their skills and the amount of time that they have to devote to this project. We can organize a video or live presentations. Video is like the one we are holding now, or we can organize for a presenter such as me to go to where people are willing to listen to the evidence of judicial wrongdoing already contained in the study of the Federal Judiciary that is available to you, and the different, the two unique national stories that they can also participate in researching, whether as journalists or as students of the schools that I mentioned before. Another project that is very concrete and very timely is to find a white knight. And what that means is to find a politician that wants to make of exposing judicial wrongdoing his or her distinguishing issue. There must be somebody there, out there, who wants to run on this issue because it attracts the attention of the public. It has the potential of distinguishing him as a person that stands up for the rule of law. And he can be the person that can provide a magnet for more journalists as he gets traction, as he tries to organize the millions of people that have become victims of judicial wrongdoing. And that provides another element for the team to work on, and that is to try to develop a civic movement. And that too is precedented. And the president is known to all of you, and that president is the Tea Party. The Tea Party, some 15 years ago, was unknown. And nevertheless, it has acquired such power as to dominate Republican politics and as a result to be a crucial element of American politics. And we could expect that a party that, or a civic movement that demands accountability not only of judges, but also of the politicians that appoint them, could also get a lot of traction. Because as we saw in Virginia, people do pay attention to elections. They pay attention to what the politicians are doing on issues that concern them. And that is a key point. Wrongdoing by judges concern everybody, everybody's property, everybody's liberty, and all the rights and duties that define our lives. So the civic movement would be formed of people that are defending their own basic fundamental interests that define them as Americans. We can also try to produce a documentary, whether among ourselves or perhaps a much better by trying to attract the attention of politicians and other makers or producers of documentaries. And that is presented too. We have the documentary of Michael Moore that at the time was the highest grossing documentary in history. So there is money. And as I mentioned before, money is important if we want to be a viable a movement, if we want to be even a viable team. So money is not only important to us, but also to the people that are likely to be willing to produce the documentary. A documentary that exposes wrongdoing of this nature, exposed through these pinpointed and well-focused stories, has the potential of attracting the attention of people that are now called upon to vote in the primaries and the presidential election. So this is also a very realistic and timely proposal that we can discuss on as a team. The other proposal is to organize a symposium at a school of good reputation that will attract people, will even attract judges, where we may find judges willing to expose wrongdoing inside their courts in a confidential way, because we can assume that there are judges that are disgusted by what they see going on in their courts, particularly people that have been recently appointed to a judgeship, but they know that they would attract only the ire of all their peers if they were to expose them openly. So this will allow us to get in touch with insiders, whether they be judges or law clerks or clerks of court, or even people that practice in those courts often, so as lawyers, to get inside information that would be useful to the further investigation by journalists, to the further investigation by our team of researchers, whether they be members of our team or the schools. So this symposium at a well-known university or other institution like a think tank could attract many people that would provide us with very valuable information aside from the information that they could present from the podium. And the other project, of course, is fundraising. We have to raise our funds in order to be able to travel and to communicate with other people and to hold meetings, because rooms are not made available for free. Sometimes you have even to provide transportation to people. That is how a civic movement works, how you can get people to provide sustained help to the development of the team, and that is how politicians run their campaigns. They have to get people to work for free, but they also have to get people to donate, and we have to do that too. So what we can obtain from all this effort is, right now, to make a team, to attract the attention of journalists through presentations, to try to get a political candidate to join us, to develop a civic movement, and to participate in what is likely to happen here in the United States for the first time, a constitutional convention, because 3/4 of states have requested one as provided for in the Constitution, and that would be an excellent opportunity for us to make judicial accountability and reform a top issue, but we can only even dream of being there if we are elected. And we're not going to be elected if we are not known and we do not stand for something clear and capable of interesting the public. What also we can endeavor to obtain through this team is to pioneer this judicial on accountability reporting as a profit-making activity that can bring in money not only for the team but also for journalists and for researchers. And finally, what we can expect to obtain from all this effort in the long run is to become known as the people's champions of justice, and that would be a moral reward of greater value than any money that we could ever gain. And that is the presentation, and now I would be willing to take questions.
Well, I have to say, Dr. Cordero, that this is a very, very... Hold on a minute, I forgot. Now can you hear me?
I cannot hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that.
No.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to say that this is something that you have very, very, very thoroughly put together. I am very impressed with the amount of input and study, that you put into the problems. And of course, our team is doing so much of what you're doing. It'll be very interesting for us to be able to make common cause with a lot of this. Ours is more a people's movement rather than a political movement. So in the interest of that, I would like to ask if you are employed by any of the think tanks, like the Tea Party. I know they're very involved with one of the think tanks. I can't remember the name of it, the Freedom Foundation. They send out a lot of people. Are you employed, or do you work with any of those?
No, I am completely unaffiliated.
All right. We are too. I mean, we just make absolute the fact that we are all volunteers working together on this with what we do. And so we're going to be very interested in sharing our investigation. We've had 2,000 researchers watching with absolute deliberation a DC gun case that has been going on for the last year and a half from a private attorney general who knows the laws and the rules of the court as well as anybody that we are aware of. And so we've literally cataloged the abuse to the individual private citizen. So we're looking at it more from a people's movement and as opposed to political. That would be the main difference that I see. And I would really be very interested in hearing from Steve and some of the others who are really working with this from within the political spheres. I'd like to really get your take on it, Steve, if you would share in particular. Steve, you're muted. Give him just a minute there. Okay, while he's coming on, Sue or anybody else, anybody have any feedback for Dr. Cordero at this point?
Yes, I'm really impressed with what you've done. I spent 15 years in the legal field and working with these judges in courts and seeing exactly things that weren't right. Anyway, put it that way. So I'm very impressed with your research, and I see a lot of things that correlate with what we're doing. And like Rebecca said, we are this is a people's movement, people powered, and we think that once we get our message across, people like you can come in, or you come in at the same time and get your message out. It'll be much more powerful to the people than if we work in small groups. That's just my thinking. It's my personal thinking anyway, is getting all of these people together, and people like yourselves that have done such wonderful work together in one forum to present information that we have gathered in a way that the people can understand. And
Yes.
that's just my basic comment for now.
Well, the Tea Party began like that way. The Tea Party at the beginning didn't dream of becoming a political party. The only thing that they were concerned was to prevent politicians from raising taxes even more. So the Tea Party stands for tax enough already. And at the beginning, we can simply try to get people together, obviously, but if we cannot force politicians to take action, or if we can not become elected, nothing is going to happen, because just protesting is not an end in itself. It is a protesting and, coming together, being assembled to petition for a redress of grievances with enough power of votes to force the people that now hold the power, the politicians, to do something about our concerns. Otherwise, it is simply a lot of people crying in the streets, but nothing is going to happen. So we have to think how we can get all those people to become so involved that politicians will take them seriously. That even, as I mentioned before, some of them will join us because they will see how they stand to gain from doing so. And that is exactly how the Tea Party became the political powerhouse that it has become, by joining together with politicians, people that were candidates for the first time, and people that were in office, and they then moved together to force their respective political entities to put a hold on raising ever more taxes. And we have them to do that by showing that it is in their own interest to pursue this investigation, to join with us, because in the end, it is even more invasive to have judges rule on our rights and our duties and our liberties for their own interest than just raise taxes. So this is in their own interest, and that must be always emphasized. And I think that it would be a very good idea if we could join together, and if we can get in touch with some of your researchers. And if you have so many of them, there must be some people that have connections to universities, to law schools. They were perhaps former students of journalism or business schools or information technology companies or schools, and that they can put us together. For example, in the information technology realm, I have mentioned in my paper for this seminar how important the projects are that can be solved through information technology. One of them being doing the statistical pooling of judges' decisions, so as to determine their biases, their trends in the way they are deciding cases, how a whole court compares with other courts, and then we find trends and patterns and connections. And that is a way that can be advanced the whole exposure of wrongdoing by using technology. You can use linguistic analysis of judicial decisions to determine who wrote them, whether it was the judges as they should be, or whether it was simply their clerks, which is not what is supposed to be. We can use technology software to do literary analysis, statistical analysis of decisions in order to determine how the decisions go. So there is a lot that can be gained from many of the researchers that must be among those 2,000 that did research for you. And the fact that I have laid out exactly, concretely, what I am proposing facilitates getting their attention. And if you put together another group like you have today, then we can hold this presentation either live or by video, and little by little, we can grow the team. And we can get something done now when it counts the most, when we have a 2-year period where politicians are going to be asking people not only to vote in November of 2016, but now to donate, to endorse them, to work in their headquarters and the state offices for free, to engage in disseminating their information by word of mouth. So there are many ways in which people are now concerned by what is going on, particularly since we have had such a series of scandals that have outraged people. We have them here in the US, the IRS scandal, the veteran scandal, the Secret Service scandal. We have the Fast and Furious scandal, and so scandalous that Congress, for the first time in history, held the Secretary, the General Attorney, Eric Holder, in contempt of Congress. The first time in history that a sitting member of the cabinet is held in contempt for refusing to comply with a subpoena requesting documents on the Fast and Furious gun-running a program of the Department of Justice. And another element of this involvement of the Federal Judiciary and of the Department of Justice as a counterparty in the executive branch in wrongdoing is precisely what former CBS reporter Cheryl Atkinson has stated in her complaint for $35 million against the Department of Justice, that they hacked into their home and work computers as she was a reporter for CBS, a national network investigating Fast and Furious and the Benghazi scandal. So we have now the a most receptive public to pay attention to what we are saying, that government and at all levels and all politicians must be held accountable. And it seems to me that there can be hardly any other feature more appealing to journalists than to have a receptive audience, because obviously that means that people are going either to watch or read what they produce in the reports. So if we can get people among those 2,000 researchers, first to join our team, at least to appear for another seminar as we have held today, that would be start. Then we try to get them to put us in touch with their schools and their respective entities to which they belong or for which they work. And that way we can spread the word through those presentations. We can gather other people, obviously, to form, as it were, chapters in the different states and communities. And that's the way we can grow interest for exposing wrongdoing and doing something. It is not just an issue of crying aloud that there is wrongdoing, but to do something about that. And that is why in my paper I emphasize that what we're doing is trying to expose wrongdoing and lead to reform.
There is something about it. Mm-hmm. Yes.
A positive element in what we are doing. We want to build. We do not want to limit ourselves with just criticizing judges for their wrongdoing.
Yes, and that is the thing that has just come out so beautifully in the work that you have done and in what you presented. Okay, I interrupted somebody. Who was that?
Yeah, this is Steve.
Okay, Steve.
Yeah, I agree. Your analysis is right on, and we have quite a few groups that are actively proceeding on what you're saying.
Yes.
I'm a district vice chairman in the GOP. I have access to the whole state executive committee, the state central committee, which includes the governor, the Speaker of the House, the President pro tem of our North Carolina government. But on the Tea Party groups, I've been trying to educate them. As an individual, I need to have like experts like you come up with good documentaries that I can present to these people, because they have no idea what is happening in our courts. Most of these people are, law-abiding citizens, so they have no, idea what's happening in the courts, and it's hard to explain to them without the documentation behind it. That's one thing, that using the information that Rod Class is providing, we can combine and do a coordinated effort to expose this and to prove to them what is happening.
Well, I agree very much with that. I would be willing to present to them, whether on a video conference or live. And it seems to me that since you are at such a high level in the party, that you can be an excellent person to start putting also in touch with people that not only have power in themselves to expose judicial wrongdoing and in their interest to do so, but also that they would attract a journalist. And that is very important, no? To get to participate in activities that attract journalists, because journalists have an enormous multiplier effect by publishing their reports. Once they publish their report, a lot of people are informed about it, but also other journalists who will see what the competition is doing. And this is the key for what we want to provoke. A Watergate-like generalized media investigation of wrongdoing in the federal judiciary and also at the state level, because it is going to be based by competition. You can say that one company like CBS does not want to offend the Obama administration. That is what an insider such as Cheryl Atkinson has stated in her book and her deposition last week at a Senate hearing for the confirmation of the new Attorney General, that CBS did not want to offend the Obama administration, and because of that, it had cut off her access to the air, to air her her reports. But once CBS were to see that other journalists are reporting on this news, they have to come in, because otherwise they would not attract the audience, and nothing attracts more audience than scandal that is related to politics, because obviously politicians hold the power of what we are going to do now and in the future. So it is very important to attract journalists, and they have also sources, and that is very important because we want to get inside information. In the Watergate context, that was called deep throat. Deep throat was none other than the deputy director of the FBI, who provided inside information at the very top of government to Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, the reporters that investigated the Watergate scandal. And we need to get that kind of people. So it is not just from the outside and from researchers such as I have done, but also we have a strategy to try to get inside information that must be very valuable, that can expose from the inside the wrongdoing. And also journalists obviously have access to documentarists who would be able, who have the knowledge to put a documentary on these two unique national stories. And I think that we have to emphasize that, because what we are saying with those two unique national stories is that we have the means of attracting national attention. So instead of just telling the people in North Carolina, okay, listen, come together and you're going to invest the money only on a concern of North Carolinians. You're saying this concerns not only the people in this state, but in the rest of the country. And your investment will be even more productive, not only in terms of revenue, but in terms of prestige. And when you do that, you can become a national figure. And you can then run for Congress, because as I said before, it is a constant of the strategy to bank on the self-interest of people. Nobody works as hard as when they work for themselves. And if we take that into account and forget about extending our hand, asking for people to give us help, and if we say, no, listen, we are helping you, we are bringing to you a strategy that makes sense, that has been well thought out, that can be implemented realistically, that has the backup of precedent, then we can convince them to join with us and to work on together. And that is something that we have to stress all the time. And it seems to me that people at your level who has access to such people in the very party that can gain the most from the two stories, the Republicans. The Republicans are not more interested in honest judiciaries than the Democrats, as I mentioned before, but they have the most to gain, obviously, from tarnishing the brand of the Democrats. If you had a scandal now that ran throughout the nation, that was commented on every night in the news, on the papers, at the water cooler, concerning the Democrats, do you think that they are going to say next, yes, and still I'm going to vote for the Democrats? They would cast up either a vote of protest against Democrats for being so corrupt and being exposed as being so corrupt, or otherwise they would even vote for Republicans, saying now this is the party that finally had the courage to expose it and deal with any retaliation from judges afterwards. So what we're trying to do is telling politicians, listen, you have a choice now. You can either continue protecting judges and withhold your support from this movement, or you can now support this movement, be elected by the people, and then deal with judges afterwards when you are in a position of power, when you have proved that you have the support, obviously, of the people that voted you into office. And that would be a choice that makes sense because it is reasonable. It is better to be in power and prospectively to have to deal with judges than not to be in power and to have nothing, because if you're not in power, you have nothing else to offer judges. So you are nobody after you have lost your position in office. Like Eric Cantor, the leader of the Republicans in the House that was voted out in Virginia, now he's nobody in the party. Of what good is it for him to have protected judges to the extent of it, whatever extent he did? So those are arguments that can persuade politicians in the Republican Party at your level to begin with, that they should pay attention to what we are saying, that they have a lot to gain now from exposing this wrongdoing through the investigation of the two unique national stories, and that they should join forces with us in pursuing this matter as soon as possible, because of the primaries are only a few months away. But the campaign for the presidential election already started, as you know, and it is obviously particularly intense in the Republican Party, where right now, by last count, there are 13 people considering or having declared running for the presidency. So it is very important for us to find among those 13 people the one who has to stand the most from the investigation of these two stories. And obviously that person will be the one that has least involvement with judges, particularly because it is a newcomer that never either endorsed or recommended, let alone confirmed any federal judge, or because it is a person that has already exposed his disgust with corruption in politics. And you find that kind of people in the Tea Party, or also in movements of victims of different kinds of politicians, whether it is because they have been harmed by the IRS scandal, or the Fast and Furious scandal. You know that some of those guns, even war weapons that were sold by the Department of Justice to drug lords, killed at least one officer of the frontier patrol. So those are kind of people that have now been outraged at what the government has done, would be fertile ground for us to say, we want to join forces with you, we share your outrage, and there is something here, very concrete, very reasonable, very down to earth, that we can do together now during the primaries and the presidential election campaign.
Yeah, I agree with all that. There's one item that we find that it's hard to get the media, the mainstream media involved. We have local independent, investigative reporting. What we need is some type of a nationwide network that we can get this spread out. And I think that's what we're trying to develop with this group. We're going to go into several websites that are trying to bring these different Tea Party groups, constitutional groups all together, so that when there is a message that we can spread it out throughout the country.
Yeah,
And
we can also use social media.
yes. Now, what type of a network have you been able to put together at this point, Dr. Cordero?
Actually, it is very, very difficult to work with victims of judicial wrongdoing for the simple fact that they are so absorbed by their own local personal case.
Mm-hmm.
They have no idea of how they can help other people. They are not interested in doing that. They have no clue exactly how to go about solving their own problem, let alone trying to solve other people's problem. It's very, very difficult to coalesce them into a group. You have to begin with people like Mr. Steve and people that already are interested in public affairs. And it is through them that you get a toehold in the media, and you can then create a movement. With victims of judicial wrongdoing, we're going to get absolutely nothing.
Okay, so I would like to ask what brought you, and I'll have to say I've got another meeting very, very shortly here, so I know we're going to have to wrap it up, but I would really like to know what got you involved in this. I mean, you put so much time into this. What got you really stirred up enough to get involved? That would be one of the things that I would really love to know.
Well, because I am a lawyer, I have seen from the inside how the system works. So I have taken cases from the very lowest court in the federal hierarchy, the bankruptcy court, where the money is, and I am going to tell you why the money is there, to the district court, to the circuit court. I presented a case before just a judge of Sotomayor at the time, to the Supreme Court. The money is in the bankruptcy courts because you have every year well over 1 million bankruptcy, 95% of which are by people. That means persons, not companies. And when you are bankrupt, you do not have $100 or $200 or $300 or $400 to pay an hour to a lawyer. So what do? You simply present your case pro se. That makes for a disaster because bankruptcy law is extremely complex. And when you are fearing about losing everything that you have, you do not have the time to become a lawyer and understand the bankruptcy code, let alone the the federal rules of bankruptcy court. The point is, they take advantage of you, and the money is there because the judges can determine who pays what to whom and who can keep the money that is at stake, whether the creditor or the debtors. And in 2011, the amount of money that bankruptcy judges had to dispose of through their decisions was $373 billion. We are talking about a third of $1 trillion. That is where the money is. And something that is even more interesting is that bankruptcy judges are not nominated by the President of the United States and confirmed by the Senate. They are appointed by the circuit judges. The circuit judges are those who appoint bankruptcy judges. You can imagine what happens when an appeal goes from the bankruptcy court to the district court to the circuit court. Do you think that the circuit court are going to turn against the people that they appointed as judges, and in so doing indict their own judgment for the character and the honesty of the people they appointed? Of course not.
Right.
So they have a bias, inbuilt bias, to affirm the decision of their appointee. But not only that, the district court, together with the judges of the circuit court, can remove the bankruptcy judge. So the circuit court appoints them, and if they get too unruly, if they do not toe the line, if they do not know how the game is played, the district judges and the circuit judges can remove them, which means that it is not through impeachment in the Senate, which is in Congress, which is extremely difficult to get, but rather by a decision of judges who say, hey, listen, this is not the way it is done here. We appointed you for something, and you knew that in advance. What is it that you're doing now? What about all the money that you are disposing of? If you do the right thing, you can sell at an undisclosed auction those assets to our people for pennies on the dollars. We can flip them, sell them on the market at market value, and make a bundle of money. And that is how the system works. And it is in there.
Yeah. Okay, so I would love for you to just share that story on our Adventures into Sovereignty show. We have several media outlets within our team, so I'll be getting in touch with you. I would just love to have you be one of our guests, and I'm sure that Sasha Stone, who has a very much of an international platform, would like to also invite you to engage with us in this way. And I just see us being able to work together in several ways. So I really want to thank you for sharing the time with us this morning and really just sharing your story. I just really feel that you have put so much attention into the way to do this, that there are lots of ways that we'll be able to work together. So I'll share with you. Yeah, I'll share with you what we've been doing and our team of researchers, what we focused on, so that you can have a little bit better idea of what we're about. And then let's go from there. There are quite a few people, Dr. Richard Fine. Have you talked with Dr. Fine?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, there are several. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'd be real interested in carrying this conversation further, and I really want to thank Alfred for being the one to introduce us, and to thank you for all of your work always, Alfred, and see if anybody else has any quick comments before I know we've got to close it down before too long here. So anybody else?
Yeah, I got a little quick something to add, and
Okay.
so my internet's sort of cut in and out a little bit throughout the presentation. So if I'm bringing up something that's redundant. I apologize, but so I've looked through part of that really long report, not a whole lot of it. I've looked at the Delano case section of it, and a light bulb went off in my head, because something that we've been looking at in our research is the corporatization of the court system. And also, I've been researching it was a Swiss study that was put out, I think, in 2011, called I'm going to bring it up real quick. It was called The Network of Global Corporate Control. And something that just occurred to me that I wanted to bring up was looking at harmonization of interests and seeing how what's going on with the unaccountability with judges in our system here in America is connected to an international framework of essentially centralizing resources and money, etc. Yeah, anyway, so I guess that wasn't even really much of a question. It was just a comment. Are you familiar at all with that study?
No, I'm not familiar with the study, but it seems to me that it presents opportunity to see how judges network with other people at what is called judicial junkets. Judicial junkets are seminars put together by big companies where they invite judges to make a presentation. Now, you can imagine that at those junkets where in the most cases it is the company that pays for all the expenses of the judge, the company will have an interest in having private conversations with those judges and telling them what is in it for them if they know how to work together in the system. So that is very important. And those junkets have gone all the way to the attention of the Federal Judiciary because it is a way of buying judges. You invite them to Hawaii, all expenses paid, and even though the judges are supposed to report those expenses and only to accept a certain amount of expenses paid and then to reimburse all other expenses, they don't do that. And even the director of the administrative office of the U.S. courts stated that. So it's not something that critics of judges say. It is the people inside the office of the court that say that judges are not doing what they should do in order to avoid the appearance of impropriety. The appearance of impropriety is a standard in the code of judges that states that they are supposed to avoid even the appearance of impropriety. And that standard is so powerful that on May 14, 1969, Justice Abe Fortas had to resign his justiceship in the Supreme Court of the United States because Life magazine had put out a series of articles stating that he had engaged in improprieties. And those improprieties were not even misdemeanors, they were all felonies. They were simply something that was not expected of a judge to do. He had accepted $10,000 to present a course at American University in summer, and that cost him his justiceship. And so it's very important to find the connection between judges and big money in corporations.
Yeah. What was his name?
Abe Fortas. Abe Fortas. ABE Fortas. And you can find it if you do a search in my file, if you downloaded my file.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. And you will see there, it's a page JUR column 92 section D. So juror colon 92 section D, and that's where the references and the synopsis of 8 Fortes. And keep in mind, the investigation at that time took place because President Johnson had nominated Justice Porter. He was already a justice. He had already been through the vetting of the media, but President Johnson had nominated him to become Chief Justice. And even so, he had first to resign to withdraw his name from the justiceship nomination. And because Live magazine kept at it, he had to resign. So I hope that to work with all of you, I'm very interested in doing so. And I am very willing to appear as the presentations that you organize.
Fantastic.
And
Yes.
you can send to them my file. You can point out the paper for the seminar. You can send the link or otherwise the shorter version that I sent to Mr. Weber this morning. But it is much better if you send the link because then, as Mr. Polkanat could do right now, they have a reference in blue text in those pages of the paper. They click on it and they go to anywhere in the 652 other pages of the report where they can find additional information. So it is so much better to send them the link and make available the whole file with the study.
It's ready. It may need a little more salt and pepper. Okay. Well, fantastic. Alfred, you want to sum up?
Yes. Well, thank you. Yes, Dr. Cordero, we certainly want to thank you for your work in having brought together what I think are an extraordinary number of data here that are not generally known. This is perhaps the greatest kept secret of the United States government. The fact that the most rogue branch of government is in fact the judiciary. And we want to thank you for bringing that message public today. And we look forward and we're very happy that dynamic has occurred today, and that you'll be able to follow through on various confluence of projects and interests and perspectives. So I think this has been a very successful seminar and symposium and occasion. So thank you all.
Yes, thank you, Alfred, for getting us all together. And we really do look forward to sharing more and taking this to another level because, man, it's time. We all know where the corruption is, and we all know that it's up to us to do something about it. So that's really what we're all working toward. And we really just thank you so much for taking the time, all of you who have participated in this today, and helped us get to this level of understanding. So we really thank you very much for taking time out to participate.
Well, I appreciate your attention and I look forward to working with all of you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. I so much thank you for all the effort that you have made to put us together.
Certainly.
We will be in touch.
Okay.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Good now.
Yes, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.